Hey guys, FunnyGuyTimmy here for another writing related video. I'm going to try to make these writing Wednesdays just because it just makes sense, to where I post a video about writing or movies, production, all of this from my perspective as a writer, actor, and a very amateur filmmaker. Maybe kind of as an editor as well, and to try to talk about elements of Hollywood and popular films from my perspective, not as a perspective of a critic, not from the perspective of a fan, not from the perspective of an audience member, but more from a writer, from the small niche area of filmmaking outwards. Which my big thing is writing. I'm not a professional writer in the sense of that you've probably seen a lot of my work. Unless it's on here, then you've probably seen a good bit of my work. But I think I've submitted 5 screenplays to people to shoot and produce. I think 2 of them have been shot. 3 of them were reviewed and they liked it, but they ended up not using it. But anyway, I'm probably also going to try to start posting beneath in the description, maybe some of samples of my work and stuff like that. So anyway, I want to talk about why a lot of films nowadays are really, really bad, especially big blockbuster Hollywood films. And a lot of that doesn't really have anything to do with the writing. A lot of people want to blame the director, the actors, and the writing. But in honest perspective of what makes a good film good and what makes a bad film bad. What makes a good film good can often be the director, the writer, and the actors. There's a lot of really bad, scripts that were made good, made better because of the actors. Like, I'll give you a great example. Now, this isn't to bash Quentin Tarantino, but I think if Quentin Tarantino did Django Unchained and didn't use the actors that he used, and they were more like just no names, or they were, weren't Academy Award winners, it wouldn't have been as good. Leonardo DiCaprio's glass smashing scene was made amazing because he's a great actor, and he was working with an average level dialogue. I don't think there was anything in that dialogue that was new or fresh or original. Quentin Tarantino often admits that he takes a lot of stuff from old films and just mashes them together. And Quentin Tarantino's kind of the modern Shakespeare. I might do another video just talking about Quentin Tarantino and his style of writing and what I take from it and that kind of thing. But as far as like the dialogue in that scene, it wasn't amazing. It was kind of, it was okay. It was okay dialogue, but Leonardo DiCaprio really took it the extra step. He put a lot behind it, and he really took it that extra mile. So that's an example of how an actor can actually make a script better. Now, in things like how a director can make a film really amazing, like anything that's done, like Interstellar or the Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, stuff like that. Christopher Nolan. Trying to think of the director's name, but Christopher Nolan, he is a great example of a great director who really creates a universe and a world in his writing that is very easy for the actors to get a grasp of, to understand. And then on set, he helps them get into the right mood. He helps them get into the right headspace, and he really helps them creatively. He's a great example of, I've only really seen him do his own work, but I think he could take a script not written by him that he understands really well and help the actors and the rest of the crew really get on board. I think he's a little piece of fuzz randomly. I think he's a great example of how a director can make a script better. So those are examples of how actors and writers and directors can make scripts good or make movies good. But what we're seeing a lot nowadays, why films are often really bad or highly divisive, rather, is actually coming down to producers. Now, let's take a great example of something that is well produced, has a good, solid creative head of the project behind it that's actually taking it forwards. And I'll explain what's the difference between that and some franchises that don't really have that and are really kind of taking a downward spiral. Okay, so we have Marvel. Marvel, I think nowadays is the epitome of a universe or a franchise that is being handled very well. Now there's some things that we can pick at. There's some elements that I think that people would rather see or would have preferred in some of the films. Maybe there was some of the films that just didn't hit, the right mark. There's some people that, didn't quite like Ragnarok. I was one of those where I saw Ragnarok. I thought it was okay. It just didn't blow me away. And there's some people that, Thor Dark World and stuff like that. So yeah, but ultimately as a franchise, it's doing really, really well. Now let's look at something like DC. Which is really, really taking a beating and is just going downhill. And pretty much, basically after Man of Steel, anything and everything they've done, Suicide Squad, Batman v Superman, Justice League, except for Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman was actually really good. Has really been very, very subpar to bad films. And a lot of that has to do with the producer. Now, what is a producer? For those who don't know, producer is nothing like a director. They're not a writer. They're not an actor. They're not a director. Technically they're not supposed to have anything to do with the creative side of the film. They're basically glorified accountants or glorified secretaries. This is what a producer does. A producer works for the studio. So there's a script that was brought in, or an idea that was brought to the studio. The studio liked it. They want to make it a film. So they go and they get a producer. A producer's job is to make money. Their job is to take money from the studio. The studio gives them a large sum of money, an insane amount of money. And then they give that to them. They're responsible for that money. And their job is to make a profit. That's it. That's their only job. And most producers, especially that work in Hollywood nowadays, they weren't directors before, they weren't writers before, they weren't actors before. They were basically just they just worked their way up in the corporate ladder on the money side of Hollywood. They've never really been behind a camera, they've never been in front of a camera, and they've never written anything. Which isn't a problem. It's not supposed to be their job. They're not supposed to be able to do all these things. But what we're seeing with a lot of these franchises that are failing is that a lot of these producers are going above and beyond and really micromanaging and getting into the creative side and trying to sway the entire franchise and trying to squeeze out as much money as they can. And in the sense of DC, that's what we're seeing. They have people that are in charge that are, well, I don't know who's in charge now. They're constantly switching people, but they had people in charge that were looking at Marvel. Okay, this is what Marvel is doing. We need to do that. But again, they're not directors. They're not writers. They're not, they were never actors. They were never anything like that. So they don't know why that film's good. They just know that it's making money. They know that it has this element, this element, this element, and this element in the movies or in the franchise. So they're trying to duplicate that. But again, they have no creative perspective to base their opinions on. So they're going in and they're trying to, okay, we need a big boss battle. We need, a team up. We need the dark character. We need humor. They're hitting those, they're getting that check. They have the boxes and they're hitting the check boxes and we need this and this and this and this and this. And then they're going in and they're trying to micromanage the writer, the director, the acting, and they're getting way too involved. And again, their perspective is all money. Their perspective is not, is not delivering a good product. Their perspective is, even if it flops, who cares? We just need to make a profit. And so that's why a lot of those are not doing all that good. And the same can be said about the Star Wars franchise. Now, there are some of the Star Wars films that are actually really good. Rogue One, I enjoyed Rogue One. I liked, The Force Awakens for the most part. I mean, they're not my favorite Star Wars films, but I thought that they were, okay. And then, but there's been a lot going on behind the scenes that has made the new Solo film seem like it's not going to be great, or The Last Jedi has been critically or not critically panned because the critics love it, but audiensely panned. Is that a word? Is that a thing? There's a lot of people that just don't like it, and a lot of that has to do with the production. Kathleen Kennedy, I'm not really trying to put her on blast, okay? I'm not trying to insult Kathleen Kennedy, but Kathleen Kennedy has never been a director, has never been a writer, has never been in the acting field. In fact, all of her credits, everything that she has to her name before taking up Star Wars was just being basically a secretary for George Lucas, for other filmmakers, just kind of helping them on the production side. And so she's like, oh, I have experience producing. But the problem is, because she's never been a director, she's never been a writer, she doesn't know what makes a good film. And she's going in trying to really get more involved than she should be and taking it in a completely different direction. And it's all just a money grab. And that's why, that's kind of leaning in that direction. When you let a director direct, and you let a writer write, and you let an actor act, you're going to get a better product. The producer's job is to go in, they have the money, and, they've been assigned by the studio to take the money and hire the right people and make the right profit. So they set aside a certain amount of money for a director. So they need to find a director. So they go out and find out, okay, this guy's this, they normally have a script before they find the director. They have the script, and so they're trying to find a director who has done similar projects or has done similar styles of films or stuff like that, or a director that seems like they can branch out of comfort zone or really stretch or just take anything and make it really good. And normally they look at directors who've made money. And people that they can afford. So they set aside a certain amount of money. They go to directors. They pitch it. They let the director read the script, and then if the director likes it, if he can visualize it, he sees it. He presents them. This is how much I'll do it for. And then if they agree, they hire them. Now they have this amount of money to hire the rest of the team, whether it's executive producers, assistant directors, the cinematographer, the director of photography, the studio to do the special effects. They break it down, then they go to the actors and stuff like that, and they keep going. So their job is to write checks. And then after they've signed over all the checks, they've already handed off all the money for the team. They've put together the team that works well together, that all visualize the script. People that have credit to their name, they have skill, they're confident in their product. The producer now, after they've handed over the money, is supposed to step back and let the creative team do what creative teams do. But that's not happening. What's happening now is that the producer, after they've handed off the money, is now stepping in and is constantly staring over the shoulder of the director, which is not a creative environment. It's not leaving the director to do what a director does. Let's say that you hired a doctor. Let's say a plumber. I don't know why you'd hire a doctor, but you hired a plumber, and you have leaky pipes in your walls, and he comes in. You looked down the reviews, maybe Yelp or something like that, and you found the right plumber in your area, right price. You bring him in, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go do it. He tells you, how long it's gonna take and stuff like that, and the entire time he's there trying to fix your pipes, you're just breathing on his neck the entire time, just looking over his shoulder. And anytime he tries to do anything, whether it's, fix this pipe in this way, or maybe cut down a pipe, or put on a certain kind of rubber tape to seal it, you're always criticizing everything he does. And you're always telling him, no, you should use this. You should do this instead. Which doesn't make any sense because you're not a plumber. That's not your job. You hired him to do a job. He knows how to do it. He's done it before. Why would you hire him if you wouldn't let him do it? So all you're doing is just constantly badgering him. And anytime he doesn't do what you want him to do, he has two choices. He can either quit, or he can do what you want, and you're not going to be given the proper high quality plumbing job that you wanted, because essentially the person who did the plumbing job was you, the person who doesn't know how to do plumbing, and you might as well have just done it yourself. And so that's what we're seeing with The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi, Kathleen Kennedy brought in Rian Johnson. And again, I don't think that Rian Johnson is a bad filmmaker. I don't think he's a bad writer. But from what I've heard and from what I've seen, she was leaning over his shoulder way too much and dictating to him what he could and couldn't do, which for anyone creative is not how that should be approached. You really need to step back. And with J.J. Abrams, love him or hate him, he was way more of a, in his own, this is how I want to do it, very creative guy. He really is a really good writer and really good director. Whether you like Star Trek or whether you like Star Wars is irrelevant to the fact that he actually is a really good creator and a really good director. And so, he is more of doing the way that he wants it, and that's why you get a better product with him. Even if the producer's kind of over his shoulder, he's more likely to negotiate or, communicate with the producer, telling them where the lines are, where the boundaries are. As opposed to Rian Johnson, which didn't really have that many films under his belt, and didn't have that much writing under his belt. So I don't really think that if Kathleen Kennedy did peer over his shoulder and tell him what he could and couldn't do and tried to really dictate, the film to him and really kind of take it over, I don't think that he would have had the professionalism and the gusto or the maturity to tell her where her boundaries are and where she needs to step back. And that can also be said. It's not. I'm not just saying Disney, Kathleen Kennedy, and stuff like that. Like I said, it's also DC. Sony is another prime example of where producers overstep their boundaries. The Spider-Man franchise, was basically crippled twice by producers going above and beyond, or just below and too far, rather. And same thing with Fox and the Fantastic Four. That's another prime example. Fan Four Stick is a prime example of where producers went in and tried to take over the director's job and basically ruin the entire film by overstepping boundaries, because their entire thing is making a profit. With the Spider-Man franchise, the producers had the idea that the more villains they put in the film, and that goes for Spider-Man 3 and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. That goes for the same two villains. It's the exact same problem. Their idea was the more villains and the more characters we have in the movie, the more people will be able to get into theaters, and the more people that will, get in the seats, and the more tickets will sell. Because the idea is, like, maybe we have people that are fans of this character, we have fans of this character, so they'll want to see it. When it came to Spider-Man 3, which now, after seeing everything that's happened recently, is comparatively not that bad of a film. Sam Raimi originally just wanted to do Sandman. He wrote a script for Sandman, and he wanted to do an entire film Sandman. He didn't really want to do Venom, and he wanted to kind of leave out, he wanted to save that for later. He didn't want to do Venom right now. But the studio said, they did a poll, and there was a lot of people that wanted to see Venom. And so they're like, you have to do Venom. People want to see Venom. They want to see Venom. We want to see Venom. It's going to sell a lot of tickets, sell a lot of toys, games, all this kind of stuff. You have to do Venom. He's like, I'm not doing Venom. I already wrote my script. This is the one I want to do. And so they basically forced him to put Venom in. And so instead of rewriting the script, he just shoehorned Venom into his already existing script. And the same thing. They were like, we want Green Goblin, we want this, we want that. You got to keep putting them in, keep shoehorning them in. And that's why the script was so long and so disjointed, and Venom came out of left field and was only in like the last act, and the Harry Goblin thing was kind of a side story, and the part with Harry wasn't that bad. And that's why the majority of the focus was on Sandman. And Sam Raimi, after they told him, you have to do this, this is what you're doing, he was like, all right, but this is going to be my last film. I'm not doing any more for you. This is too much. Okay, I wanted to do Sandman. I wanted to make a good story, and you're wanting me to make a bad story. So that whole Spider-Man down the sidewalk strut where it's just, yeah, all right, one of the worst scenes in the entire movie, that was basically him flipping off the studio. That was basically him saying, you guys suck. You wanted this. This is what you get. All right. And that's a prime example of producers overstepping their boundaries. A lot of the times, screenplays, I don't want to say a lot of the time screenplays are better than the film. That's not always true. But when the screenplay hits, when it's first written, it's often very different than the product that you end up with. For a couple reasons. Number one, someone writes a screenplay, and then they present it, the studio likes it, and they want to change some stuff up about it. So they do a rewrite, and then they go to find the director. The director has his idea, and they do another rewrite. And then, after they've already, basically kind of cast it, and they kind of go over it, goes over another rewrite. So by the time you get to the finished product, and then the actual editing team will actually kind of change up the story a little bit once it hits the cutting room floor, kind of move some pieces around, maybe change up some dialogue, change some things up in the special effects. That, again, changes the story very differently from what it was originally written. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. If it's the producer's idea to do all this, it's probably going to be bad. If it's a director's idea to do all this, it might be really good if he's a really strong, really smart director. That's just kind of a ramble on why a lot of films are really bad nowadays. There are some exceptions. There are some things like, some more independent films. Independent films seem to be just skyrocketing nowadays. Things like Get Out, which was a very small budget, which was written and directed by, I can't remember which one, Peele, something. I think it's Peele. The guys from Key and Peele on YouTube. And he basically wrote it, directed it, and produced it all by himself. And since he's the one, it was his vision, he was able to take it in a creative and strong direction. If he had written it and someone else directed it, or if someone else produced it, it might not have been as good. But due to the fact that he had his own, vision and he put it together, it turned it out pretty good. Now, that's not to say that every time someone directs, produces, and writes their own stuff, it's always going to be good. That one's a hit and miss. That one's 50-50. Adam Sandler is a great example of someone who produces, directs, and writes his own stuff, and he has no idea what he's doing. He's terrible. And the stuff that you like of Adam Sandler, the best stuff of Adam Sandler has often been stuff that he didn't write, direct, and produce all his own. Maybe he wrote it, maybe he directed it, but normally there was someone else there to give him this feedback, to kind of give him, kind of push him in a different direction. But now that he's basically been on his own and he's got his own studio and no one's there to tell him, I think that's a bad idea, he's been just bombing constantly. And it really is a bummer. There was The Cobbler, which was one, I don't think he wrote or directed it or produced it or anything. He was just in it, and it was an okay movie. It was an okay film. But again, basically, if he writes it, directs it, and produces it, he's just hiring his friends, and it's going to be terrible. It's pretty much going to be bad. Now, I do have a personal experience with producers and companies ruining creative product. I was doing a commercial one time, and I was brought in. This is how the director presented it to me. Is basically the character was kind of special needs, and it was fun. It was fun to do it, kind of over the top, silly, kind of like the dude's just not all there. And but after every single take, the producers, there was like 4 or 5 of them sitting underneath a tarp. They're all wearing the exact same suit, and they're just sitting in front of a screen, and they're watching from like a block away. And they'd bring him over there, or they'd go and talk to him. And every time the director went and talked to them, he'd come back and he'd get more and more depressed. They were telling him, that the character that I was portraying was seeming too retarded, and just Down syndrome, and we would offend people with Down syndrome if I kept playing him this way. I was like, well, the character doesn't have Down syndrome because I don't have Down syndrome. That's not how I'm playing him. He's just goofy and silly. They're like, yeah, but people might perceive that. So we kept having to dumb down the lines, or not really. We kept having to make him seem less and less silly and less stupid, because the character was supposed to be stupid. We tried to just seem like he was just mildly confused, just a normal guy who's mildly confused. And at the end of the entire shoot, the take that they went with was the worst. It was the lowest energy. It was the one we were just tired. We were exhausted. We hated it. It wasn't fun, and it wasn't funny anymore. If they had gone with the first take, the first good take that we had, it would have been hilarious, but they wanted to go with the one that didn't insult anybody, even though no one was insulted. So anyway, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. This is kind of a long ramble. These ones are going to be a little bit longer as far as like rambling goes on, because there's a lot to get out there. There's a lot to explain as far as the writing and the production side of stuff goes. So anyway, if you have any questions about writing, directing, producing, anything like that, anything that I've talked about in here, or if you want to disagree with me, which is totally fine, leave them down in the comment section below. So remember, I'm going to try to post these on Wednesdays, these writing videos on Wednesdays. Not sure when I'm going to start. I'm going to record a whole bunch now and then edit them and then just start uploading them on Wednesdays. So anyway, thank you guys for watching, and peace.